Hello humans, it's just Martine, except it's not. There's also a Harris with us. Today, Harris is going to pick 3 books for me to read. He insists that I tell you why we're filming this video. Of course, I keep telling him that the reason he's thinking of is not the reason we're filming this video. We were going to film this video. He just has a vengeance now. It was like maybe a month ago that I was visiting Harris and we were having dinner and I was talking about how successfully Josh had done picking out the next few books that I had read and the fact that I had really enjoyed them. And I said in comparison to the time you picked my book and I ended up hating it. And then we went into this long and drawn out battle in which we looked back through my channel to see that I was in fact wrong. I was thinking of the wrong book. The book I had thought of I did hate as much as I was remembering, but it was not the book that Harris told me to read. The book that Harris told me to read, I gave 5 stars. So now he's come back with a vengeance. So now Harris is going to pick out 3 books for me to read. In my head, the original comparison was going to be how he did versus Josh, but now he just wants to make me miserable.
I'm gonna choose the worst books.
No.
Yeah, worst books I can find.
Let's go with the rule that let's not go with easily, like, difficult ones to read, because I still might love those. They just might take me forever.
Oh no, not long books. Books
Right.
that look god-awful. The worst I can find.
Right.
I want to get you 1 stars.
So, like, remember that I like classics, and I like nonfiction, it just takes me longer to read. I made a mistake, so now Harris is going to pick out 1 book from a certain stack, and then 2 books from my bookshelf.
I'm reminded that your taste in books is so strange. The sci-fi premises are so strange. They're not bad, but it's just like reading the covers, they're all just so funky. So far, so good. We don't like that. We need the worst of the worst here.
So, tell me about the 3 books you've picked.
So here's the one you're going to read first.
Yep.
This is the one I think you'll like the least. How about that? So from the pile of new books is The Year of Living Awkwardly, sophomore year, I Want a Wretch. The synopsis was rough. And I was looking at the author information in the back, and I accidentally read the end of the book because it was the opposite page. What a terrible ending. You have very little to look forward to. Then in the bookshelf of things already likely going to be enjoyed, it was a little bit tougher, and then my legs got tired, so I just kind of grabbed whatever looked meh. I started a nonfiction because I thought that's going to be a real punishment to read, but considering that I couldn't even bear to read the back of it on my own without falling asleep squatting, you would probably break up with me because of how bad it was. So we're not going to do those. Fantasy one here.
And you just grabbed it.
It reminds me of all of those, like 10 years ago when every movie for teenagers was like a why not like Hunger Games and everything it spawned off of it. And it reminds me of this SNL sketch where, you know, they do a ripoff of like, you know, Hunger Games-esque. And they have Pete Davidson like, you know, keeps getting bags tossing him, and he's like, and then at the end of it, their big chant as they like parade through and riot is like, we don't want to be categoried. And that's really, this book just reeks, we don't want to be categoried. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hope you do too. Okay, and then the third one is called Defenders. There's this very specific reason why I chose this, and I recognize fantasy and sci-fi, like this is your bread and butter, you're gonna love these in general. Our only chance for survival was to engineer a new race of perfect soldiers to combat them. 17 foot tall. And I stopped reading after that because I could not imagine like having people 3 times someone's height like working. It would only work in a book. No movie adaptation would ever come of this. I'd be surprised. But like even in a book, I think it is just so upsettingly ridiculous.
You said I'm going to like this one the least.
Yep.
Which one am I going to like the best?
This one.
Okay. So like in my video with Josh, now I'm going to tell you what I think about the books that you picked out without having read them. And then of course we'll see how it compares to when I read them. So first I'm going to tell you where I got each of these books. I got this at the Dollar Tree. I got this at the Dollar Tree before my channel. And I got this for free on campus. Out of these, I think I'll like one of the 2 of these the least. These ones. I love sci-fi, but I hate fantasy most of the time. So I don't know why you think fantasy is my bread and butter. I do not like fantasy. To the point that I think even having to drudge through a long fantasy will make it more painful than just a young voice. I think this is going to be my favorite, and I've actually been looking forward to reading this one specifically for a while, so now I have an excuse for it. So I hope I love it like I think instead of hating it like you think I will. We'll see what happens. Well, unfortunately for him, but very fortunately for me, Harris has failed in this first task because I gave The Year of Living Awkwardly sophomore year 4 stars. Yes, it is a bit of a younger read, but first of all, I've had a lot of younger reads that have had more annoying POV voices than this one. This one was very tolerable in comparison. It was also pretty funny in some points because the main character, she would be freaking out about something like totally insubstantial, right? And so usually I feel like people would be like, ugh, this character just freaked out about insubstantial stuff all the time, which she's a teenager, so of course she did. But then her next journal entry would be like, I can't believe I'm worried about these things when like poverty is still a thing. It was just very quirky and fun, and she had some social justice takes to throw in there, which was good. I thought it was definitely satisfying in some ways too. Like, you saw the typical thing that you see in high school where like you have a year where you drift away from your best friend for certain reasons, or like they're making other friends or stuff. Typical things I did love. I don't know if you would guess it by looking at it. It just looks like a really ordinary fluffy read, but there is a queer character in this because one of the main character's best friends is gay and he has a boyfriend, and that was lovely to read. I was like, this character is so casually queer in the most beautiful way. And I don't know if they made a big deal of it in the first book because this is technically a sequel. I didn't read the first book, but it was just so casual in this book that I loved it. I was like definitely rooting for the primary relationship that this book was about, and I kind of would want to read the next book just to see, you know, how that relationship pans out. But also, I don't care enough and they don't have it at my library, but like it was definitely an enjoyable, fun read. I'm glad I picked it up. Like, I too was skeptical when I was looking at the cover. I was like, I'm going to pick this up because it's $1 and like it'll be a fast read, but it was pretty fun. Not everybody would love this. This was pretty good. So sorry, Harris, but I'm not sorry because I enjoyed this. I just read Defenders. I forget why Harris said I wouldn't like this, but once again, I'd like to say haha to Harris because I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. There was quite a bit of fighting, but not too many action sequences in spite of how chunky it seems. It was like 480 pages. It was such an interesting book. It basically tells the story of this alien invasion and how humans cope with it. And the humans cope with it by making this new race of like semi-humans called Defenders, who are like 17 feet tall with 3 legs and like no serotonin in their brain, because the alien that invaded Earth, that species, they can read the human mind like entirely. And so they were losing the war to them very badly because they knew their every next move. The invading alien species is like, they're giant starfish, basically. And they have a name that I don't know how to pronounce, but they're giant starfish, right? So the humans create this race of defenders, and they unleash the defenders on the world to take care of this other alien species. And this happens pretty early on in the book. They gain some semblance of control over the invading aliens. But then, as is always the case when humans rashly make things happen, there are consequences to the creation of the defenders. So a large portion of this story, I would say at least 2/3, deals directly with those ramifications that humans experience because they decided that because they had the power to make these defenders, they would. And one of the most interesting aspects about this is the absolute hostility of humanity and the discussions of that in here, because it's revealed several times and discussed plentifully that the invading aliens did not arrive on Earth in this story with the idea of like conquering and taking over. They just wanted to live peacefully, but the humans started attacking them. So of course they attacked back, and then it went into a full-out war. But humans are really bad at dealing with change and unknown species and just the unknown in general. And they aren't willing to listen to people or beings that are different from them. And they make mistakes that lead to all of the ramifications in this book of every kind, when they could have just avoided them in general. But they really couldn't have, because that's the way that humanity is. So it's very much a look at like how messed up humanity is. And it was just really well done, entertaining, interesting, scary, like terrifying at points when you saw the ramifications begin to happen and the defenders got their autonomy and stuff, it was terrifying to watch it all happen, knowing something bad was probably going to happen, and that the humans were like, it's fine. And then when it was not fine, to be like, I knew it would not be fine. And I cared very much about the characters in here and the things that happened to them, which is always a great sign. 4 stars. I think Harris officially failed this because I just gave this third book 4 stars as well. I think I've gotten all 4 stars across the board. This one I was dreading the most. The cover, not that great. I don't know why I picked this up in the first place, and it's also huge, so I was very much dreading it. However, when I started reading it, it was a lot better than I thought. I was immediately intrigued by the story. We open on this young boy in a town, and his name is Colin, and he is being bullied by like the proprietor's son and the proprietor's son's gang, and then his dad teaches him how to use a sling, and he gets revenge on the proprietor's son and all this stuff. And then eventually the proprietor sends this boy and his family to lead a wagon trail out through the prairie to see if they can start a new place. This gave me huge Settlers of Catan vibes for like the first 200 pages maybe. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if that was warranted, but that's what I got. And then a bunch of stuff happens, which is like the entirety of the back of this book, like one sentence for each 50 to 75 pages, I feel like, on the back of this book here. A bunch of stuff happens, and everybody in the wagon trail is killed except for Colin, and he drinks from this well of sorrows in the forest. And I wouldn't say he becomes immortal, but he basically becomes immortal. And then we take a jump, skip, and a hop through like 60 years, and we end up with him finally leaving the forest and walking back into the world that he has left behind and seeing the 3 races fighting. One of the most interesting things about this was the difference between the 3 races, not because they were all incredibly unique or anything, but because it had great commentary on culture and the idea of savages and savagery. Because Colin is a human in this book, but the humans are not the most like put together race in this whole book. I don't know how to pronounce the other ones, but there were other races that like looked down on the humans for how savage they were. They used those words. And the cultures were extremely interesting and all different. Humans get so in their head about how amazing we are as a species that like we forget that we're not the best thing ever, I guess. And so this was just an interesting look at that. There was one moment which shouldn't have been as big of a surprise plot twist as it was to me, but it was crazy for me to read, and that was like 150 pages away from the end or something. That blew my mind a little bit. I definitely feel like they would have felt like 2 separate books entirely if the characters hadn't stayed the same and there hadn't been like one main thing connecting the 2 halves of it. But it was definitely like that. Another thing that was interesting to me is we got complete closure at the end, and yet it's set up for a potential second book. I don't know if there is a second book. If there is, I probably won't be reading it because I got everything I wanted from this book within the span of this book. I thought it was really well done. It kept my interest even during like most of the fight scenes. I've been reading some books with some good attention-grabbing fight scenes lately. It was especially interesting to see Colin's powers warping and changing and stopping time and how that affected battle in some ways. We got lots of different perspectives here, different views on religion and nature and culture. Overall, it was just a fun time. So that completes all my reads for this. Again, I had a really good time, and in that, Harris failed a little bit, and I'm not sorry about that. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below which of these books seems most interesting to you. Would you ever let your partner pick out your TBR? And subscribe for more reading, writing, and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!